For 5 years, Anne Darwin played the role of a grieving widow. But behind her quiet, introverted nature was a shocking secret. In 2002, John Darwin went out for a canoe ride and never came home. His wife Anne was left heartbroken, trying to rebuild her life without him. Friends and family grieved, and the world moved on. But something about this story was not as simple as it seemed. For 5 years, a mystery surrounded John's disappearance, one that no one could have expected. And when the truth finally came out, it left everyone in shock. Hello and welcome to True Crime with Ronke. Thank you so much for joining me today. If you enjoy true crime stories, kindly subscribe and turn on the notification bell so that you never miss an upload. Let's take a look at this case. John Darwin lived in a seaside town called Carew in England. He was a teacher for 18 years before going on to work at a bank for a short time, and he worked as a prison officer at the time of his disappearance. He was born on 14th August 1950 and was 2 years older than his wife Anne, who worked as a doctor's receptionist. They got married on December 22nd, 1973 and had two grown-up sons, Mark and Anthony, who had moved out and were living on their own. The couple lived a relatively simple and modest life. However, living modestly was never the type of life that John dreamed of. And he knew that his income could not give him the life he wanted. Plus, he was sick of the daily grind of working at the prison service. So to make a secondary income, he tried several ventures. He tried stocks and shares, car boot sales, and even snail breeding without much luck. Then he decided to try the property market. He intended to build a mini property empire that would potentially make him a millionaire. He thought that if things went well, he could even retire early. So one by one, he bought property around Carew in quick succession until he had 13 houses. He rented most of those homes as bedsites. Now, bedsites are a form of accommodation common in some parts of the United Kingdom that consists of a single room per occupant, with all the occupants typically sharing a bathroom. Unfortunately, things didn't go exactly as John planned, and over time, John's property empire started to incur losses because the rental income from the tenants didn't cover the mortgage. And to make things even worse, he was racking up debts as fast as his business was failing. He owed about £64,000 on 13 different credit cards. And the once regular couple with a normal life were now living in total misery. They dreaded picking up the phone or opening their emails for fear of threatening messages from the banks they owed. They were in complete misery. The only option he had to solve his financial burdens was to declare bankruptcy and start all over. But John found that too humiliating, so he started to think of something shocking to claim insurance money. Stay with me because this case gets crazier every step of the way, and the details are truly bizarre, as you will find out soon. March 21, 2002. When John got home from work, he looked out at the sea, watching the waves carefully. The water wasn't too rough. If it had been, he knew he wouldn't survive out there. But it also wasn't completely calm, and that to him was important too. If the sea was too still, people might start asking questions. It had to look real, like a true accident. And that night, the sea was just right. Something John also factored into this mission was the time of day. He chose the afternoon on purpose because he wanted people to see him go out to sea, because they could serve as potential witnesses. In his mind, everything had to be perfect. He couldn't wait for another day. This was the moment. His plan had to happen right away, no matter what. So he takes his canoe out from his house and paddles to sea. When he paddles far enough from sight and when the coast is clear, he forces his red canoe downward and returns back to dry land and waits till it's dark. Earlier that afternoon, he had called his wife at work to pick him up at the seafront. So at around 7 p.m., Anne arrives there and picks him up. She drives him to the train station. She then returns back home and makes the call that would forever change their lives. She gets on the phone and calls the emergency number and tells the operator that her husband is missing. Once their sons hear of their dad's disappearance, they head to the family home to support their mom. Soon after the call, police launch a massive rescue operation to find John or his body. But after almost a day and a half without luck, the search is terminated and John is presumed dead at sea. Before long, family and friends start pouring into Darwin's family home to offer condolences to his grieving widow. Anthony, the couple's second son, was at Niagara Falls in Canada at the time to propose to his girlfriend, but had to cut the trip short when he heard the news. She did not have the courage to break the news to her sons herself, but a family liaison officer did. To support their grieving mom, Mark and Anthony took time off work to comfort her. It's totally incredible how Anne was able to play the role of a grieving widow. Incredible, I would say. But how could she watch her sons grieve and suffer needlessly? It's totally bizarre. But it wasn't just the family that were going in and out of the Darwin home at this time. Officers were visiting regularly, asking questions from Anne, and also searching the house. This went on for weeks. While this was going on, John was in hiding and would call his wife to ask questions and update about what was going on. So they spoke regularly on the phone. Shortly after John disappeared, his red canoe was found, totally wrecked, which provided further evidence that John was indeed dead at sea. So to John, his plan was falling into place. As his family was mourning him, John was tucked away in a small tent in the countryside. As you can imagine, the nights were getting cold and the thin tent barely kept out the wind. For John, money was running low and living in hiding wasn't as easy as he had imagined. So he did the unthinkable. He moved back to his home at number 3 The Cliff, their family home, to live with his wife Anne. Totally bizarre. To disguise himself, he wore a huge beard, which he grew while in hiding. He also began to walk with a limp and a walking stick. You are probably wondering how he could return home so easily. You see, even though John and Anne lived at number 3 The Cliff, there was a secret passage, a doorway behind a closet to number 4 The Cliff, another house which the couple also owned. Number 4 had a number of vacant bed seats, so when visitors came around, John would race to number 4 and hide away. But how could they pull this off? How could they fool so many people? One of the reasons was that they had a gravel driveway, so they could hear when someone was driving in from a distance. As I researched this story, I wondered why the cops never searched number 4 The Cliff. That is the adjoining house of the family home. Then I found out that they needed individual warrants to search each bedsit on the property. And to add to that, some of the bedsitter were occupied by tenants. Now, if you think John is the guy that would lie low hiding next door, you are completely mistaken. This man will go to the seafront from time to time with his new disguise and even join the local library where he spent a lot of time in doing research, and in time he befriended the librarian. But more on the librarian shortly. Since John Darwin was dead, at least to the world he was, He started plotting to steal a new identity for himself. He started combing through graveyards and local newspapers until he stumbled upon the name John Jones, which was the name he used to register at the library. He stole the identity of John Jones, who was born in 1950, just 5 months before him, in the same hometown, Sunderland. Sadly, John Jones died at just 5 weeks old. So John obtained a birth certificate under John Jones' name, and with a disguised new look, he went ahead to get a passport. One of the requirements for obtaining a passport is to obtain certification from a public official. And since Liberians are one of such public officials, his friend came in handy. Of course, this was unknown to the Liberian. Now, you see why he befriended her. And you won't believe this, because I found it totally unbelievable. He had his new passport sent out to his home address at number 3 The Cliff. But John couldn't fool everyone. Despite his disguise, some people recognized him. In 2003, a former prison colleague spotted him and reported to the police. But when Anne was informed about the report, she told the police that it was probably a case of mistaken identity. She said she was convinced that it was his cousin who looked just like him. Someone else recognized John. A tenant at number 4 also recognized him and asked, "Aren't you supposed to be dead?" But he never informed the police after John told him not to tell anyone. The tenant didn't want to get involved, so he never reported the incident to police. Anne also left people wondering. For example, a colleague from her old job as a GP receptionist said they heard her whispering on the phone with a man they thought was John. Remember that John's body was never found, so a death certificate could not be issued. However, the insurance company required the death certificate for Anne to claim her husband's life insurance. So at the inquest into his disappearance in April 2003, Anne was able to have her husband declared dead. And with the death certificate, she claimed her husband's £25,000 life insurance policy, his 25,000 teacher's pension, his £58,000 prison service pension, as well as £4,000 in payout from the Department of Works and Pensions, and a further £137,000 from a Norwich Union mortgage insurance policy. The total was about £250,000. With John's fraudulent scheme going according to plan, he started thinking of how to spend the money. In his spare time, and he had a lot of it, he played interactive online games for hours on end. It was on this gaming platform that he met a Kansas-based woman named Kelly Steele, who gave him a business idea about renovating a farm and raising cattle, and the duo could split the funds, the profits. He transferred £30,000 to her before flying to meet her in the US. But it turned out to be a bad investment, as all of the money went down the drain. John alleged that she purchased a run-down farm on his behalf, and she later reported to the police that John was threatening her. So to avoid any interaction with law enforcement, he flew back home to England with the investment money down the drain. And if you think John's travels ends there, you are mistaken. He begins to go on a lot of international travels. Probably because he didn't want to live in hiding for the rest of his life. So he began to look for somewhere else to settle. He and Anne traveled to Cyprus, but changed their minds about settling there after some bureaucratic issues. Then they headed to Spain, but again decided not to settle. However, John continued searching on the internet, and one day, he stumbled on the Central American city of Panama. So off they went to Panama. After staying in the city for 2 weeks, the couple decided they would settle there and planned to open an eco-resort. However, during this initial trip, they posed for a photograph. and they unknowingly set the stage for their downfall. I will get to that shortly. New visa rules in Panama required anyone wanting to live and work there to have their identity verified by the UK police, a step John couldn't take because he was officially dead. Realizing his plan had reached a dead end, he decided it was time to give up. His idea was simple: walk into a random police station in London, pretend to have amnesia, and reclaim his old life, or should I say, his old identity. In December 2007, leaving his wife behind in Panama, he headed back to Britain, walked into a police station and said, "I think I may be a missing person." He also told police that he had amnesia. When his sons heard their dad had miraculously reappeared, they welcomed him with open arms. No doubt, the cops had their suspicions about John's story, and those suspicions were confirmed when a medical checkup showed that his symptoms did not match those of a typical amnesia patient. Back in Panama, some reporters from the UK rushed to get Anne's story on her husband's miraculous return. Instead of confessing, Anne acts like it's a miracle. But everything changed when one of the reporters showed her the photo. Then she admitted that she had always known he was alive. John received a 6-year, 3-month prison sentence for faking his own death, while Anne was sentenced to 6.5 years for fraud. Anne's sentence was 3 months longer than that of John because she pleaded not guilty throughout the trial. After serving his prison term, John was released in January 2011, with Anne following in March of the same year. The couple divorced while in prison, and John later moved to the Philippines where he married a woman known as Mercy, who is 23 years younger than him. Anne, on the other hand, lives a quiet life in the UK. John and Anne were thinking of just themselves. The thing is, when Anne reported her husband might be missing, a large-scale rescue operation that involved the Royal Air Force and the Royal Navy was launched at a cost of more than £100,000, and the lives of the rescue team were put on the line. The couple's sons, Mark and Anthony, were severely affected by this crime. For one, they didn't know of their parents' financial troubles and didn't even partake in the crime. I think they are the most affected by this crime, in my opinion. They grieved their dad, who was not only alive and well, but also living just next door. How this couple overlooked their sons and allowed their needless suffering is truly heartbreaking. Anthony had to cut short his engagement because of a lie. He also had to resign from his insurance job because it became awkward talking with clients afterward. Why was it awkward? Imagine working as an insurer when your father was in the news for insurance fraud and faking his own death. And when their father returned, one can only imagine how their joy was turned into disappointment. One minute, they were enjoying their family reunion with their father, who claimed he had amnesia. And the next minute, he was being led away by police that he had faked his own death. After they discovered the truth, they cut ties with their parents, but reconciled with their mom some years later. Anne said that John was controlling and always treated her like a disruptive student. And he always ensured she followed his instructions even though he was never physically abusive to her. What are the theories out there on Anne's behavior? Some believe that she was a timid and loyal wife who was coerced into committing the crime. Some others believe that she was a willing participant, a co-conspirator in the crime. Their take is that after she dropped her husband at the train station on March 21, 2002, she had the opportunity to do the right thing, which was not to go ahead with the plan. She could have turned John in, but she didn't because she was also interested in the scam. Some question why she never mentioned to her sons that her husband was alive. But the theory is that her sons would be complicit in the crime if they did not report to the police afterward. Let's continue this conversation in the comment section. Please stay safe, and I'll see you in the next one.